Hi Matrix, welcome back. This is the second lesson in reproductive strategies. We'll be looking at 3 brand new concepts today, so lean in and concentrate and let's do this. Okay, so the first of these new reproductive strategies we're going to look at is called ovipary. We're going to look at something called vivipary and thirdly ovovipary. All 3 of these concepts basically have to do with the same thing and the same idea, and that is where does the embryo develop? And how is the embryo and their fetus nourished. All 3 of these will have different areas where the embryo develops and different ways in which they are nourished. Okay. So the first of these 3 concepts is known as ovipary. Now ovipary is where the fertilized egg develops outside of the parent. So let's think of a bird, because that's just the easiest one to think about. After internal fertilization has taken place, the female bird will lay her egg and the embryo will develop outside of the mother's body. Now, how that embryo develops and how it is sustained is because the egg has yolk inside of it, and that is what is going to provide nutrition until the egg has hatched. This, of course, is energy saving for the mother because there is no developing embryo inside of her, so she does not have to expend energy on protecting and nourishing that developing embryo. Let's look at some examples of oviparous animals. The first example are bony fish. So many bony fish are egg-laying or oviparous. Many amphibians are also oviparous. Remember, an amphibian includes frogs, and toads, and newts and salamanders. Most reptiles are oviparous as well, egg-laying. Remember, our reptiles include turtles and tortoises and crocodiles and lizards and snakes, so all reptiles. Then we have some cartilaginous fish that are also oviparous or egg-laying. So cartilaginous fish include our sharks and our rays and our sawfish. The photograph at the bottom here is showing what is known as a mermaid's purse. It is a shark's egg that is laid. So some cartilaginous fish, are all, namely your sharks and so on, are also oviparous. Okay. Then there are only 2 mammals that are oviparous or egg-laying, and they are your platypus over here and your echidna. So your platypus and your echidna, both Australian animals. And finally, just to remind you, all birds are egg-laying, all birds are oviparous. So how does ovipary maximize reproductive success? This is the question we have to ask all the time. So what is it about egg laying that is so successful? Well, in some animals, only a few eggs are laid. So perhaps in birds, for example, especially birds like ostriches, and therefore there's lots of energy saved because they're only laying a few eggs. Of course, because they develop outside of the mother, as I mentioned earlier, the mother's not providing any energy, any protection, so all that energy can be saved. The embryo is developing nicely outside the body. The yolk is highly nutritious and provides everything that that embryo needs to develop. Now, the eggs of some animals are protected and incubated. So again, our birds are a good example where they will sit on their eggs, keep them warm, keep them protected. And by protecting them and incubating them and giving them the absolute perfect environment for development and then finally hatching, of course, that maximizes reproductive success. Some of these oviparous animals also exhibit parental care. Our birds are an example again. And of course, parental care is going to maximize reproductive success because if you care for your young, it will ensure that they survive and reach maturity and therefore can reproduce themselves. Some oviparous animals' eggs have got a shell. Some have a hard shell, some have a soft shell, but the shell is going to protect them from predators, from pathogens, from damage, from dehydration. And of course, if you're protecting your developing embryo, that is maximizing reproductive success because it will ensure that they do hatch and that they then reach maturity and can reproduce themselves. Just something interesting, if you like, on the left-hand side of the slide is a juvenile fish that has hatched. Juvenile fish are unable to fend for themselves for a little while, and so therefore they carry the little yolk sac with them and they are nourished by that yolk sac until they are old enough to fend for themselves and to find their own food. The second concept we're going to look at today is what is known as vivipary. So vivipary is where the fertilized egg is retained inside of the female. So let's use a human being as an example, because I think we are all fairly knowledgeable about how this works in a human being. So we have sperm and we have egg and we have fertilization inside the fallopian tube to produce a zygote or fertilized egg. That egg will then undergo cell division and differentiation to form an embryo, which then develops further into the fetus. And after the gestation period, the mother will give live birth. And while the embryo and the fetus are developing, they are nourished inside the mother via an organ called the placenta. When we do human reproduction in a few weeks' time, we will explain the placenta in detail. But just as an introduction and maybe to get context, the placenta is a temporary organ. It's only there during pregnancy, and it provides an attachment for the fetus to the uterine wall via an umbilical cord. And it provides a means whereby oxygen and nutrients can be given from the mother to the fetus, and waste products and carbon dioxide can go from the fetus to the mother, where the mother can then get rid of it. The placenta also provides hormones that keep the pregnancy healthy and intact, so that there is no miscarriage that takes place. So viviparous animals include all of our mammals, okay, excepting we had remember the echidna and the platypus. So all other mammals are viviparous, giving live birth and having a placenta. So here we have our rhino, our little baby rhino over here, viviparous. Here is our human being. This structure over here is what I was talking about, this red structure there. That is the placenta that connects to the developing fetus via this umbilical cord. Then we have some cartilaginous fish, like sharks, that are also viviparous. Here we have a shark giving live birth, a bull shark as an example of a viviparous cartilaginous fish. And we also have some reptiles that give live birth. Here is a boa constrictor, and this over here is a green anaconda, both of which are viviparous as well. Okay, so let's look at the all-important question: how does vivipary maximize reproductive success? I think it's important to note that this process is much more energy expensive than ovipary. As you can imagine, the offspring is inside the mother and she's providing all the nutrients and the protection and so on and so on and so on. But because there's only a few eggs produced or few offspring, there is definitely enough care to do all this nourishing and protecting. And most of these viviparous animals have got high amounts of parental care. And as we've mentioned before, and which we will mention again, this will greatly increase the chance of the offspring surviving to reproductive age. Finally, the last concept, ovovipary. A little different to what we are used to. So this is where the fertilized eggs are kept inside the female until they hatch. So this is different to vivipary, where the fertilized egg differentiated into the fetus and then the live offspring was born. This is where the fertilized egg, an actual egg, is kept inside the mother until it hatches. And then what will happen is it will hatch, and then the mother will give live birth. So here we can see in this picture here, there's a shark, also a shark. You would have noticed that there are species of sharks that are oviparous, viviparous, and ovoviparous. So they're quite, they're quite interesting to study. So, but this shark over here, shame it's been killed, but you can see the eggs are retained inside the mother, and what would happen then is they would hatch inside the mother, and then the mother would give live birth. So it's a little bit different to vivipary, but it is still live birth. The developing embryos are obviously going to be fed inside or nourished inside the egg, relying on the yolk, and the mother is therefore not providing nutrition, but only providing for protection and for gas exchange. So there's, you can think about how the energy is used there. here we have a reptile giving live birth as well. Okay, so how does ovovipary ensure reproductive success? Well, your embryo is less vulnerable to predation and cold temperature because it's developing inside the mother, even though it is not attached to a placenta. It's still better than the egg being outside in the elements. The young are also born fully developed, so they can hatch, or after they've hatched, they can easily escape predators. There's an intermediate amount of energy because the mother still has to provide protection and gas exchange and so on, but not nutrients. So it's sort of in between the two other mechanisms which we've discussed today in terms of energy. So just an interesting example, and sharks are very interesting, as I said earlier, because they exhibit all three of these strategies, just different species. The ragged-toothed shark, the embryos initially will feed off the yolk inside the egg. Then, of course, the eggs will hatch. And then when the eggs have hatched, there's something called intrauterine cannibalism, whereby two of the first two pups that hatch will eat all of the others, and only two pups will be born. So that's something I find quite interesting. Anyway, enjoy your day.